good morning, afternoon, or evening, and welcome to the Bloody Disgusting Network. The following show is just horrifying. Beware.
You're obsessed with her, and you're obsessed with her daughter!
All right, easy, Geraldo.
And welcome back to Horror Queers. We're talking CD, the DJ Cenobite. We're talking Vietnam flashbacks. And we're talking a formative sexy sex scene. And I'm Joe.
And I'm Trace, and we're talking really gross pinhead brainworms.
Oh, yeah. Okay. Not where I thought you were going to go, but yes.
I know. No, there's a lot of gross images in these Hellraiser movies, but for some reason, we got not one, but two of these fuckers, coming out of his head, and it really grosses me out.
Fair enough. I do like that you've latched on to the religious iconography, considering what happens in this film.
Wait, I'm sorry. Are we talking about the scene itself, or are the worms some kind of religious thing that I'm unaware of?
Oh, God, I hope not. No,
okay.
Just the scene itself.
You scared the crap out of me. I was like...
Oh, you don't know about the Catholic worms? Duh, they're all
I know.
over the scripture.
I didn't learn about that in CCE. Yeah, we're talking Hellraiser 3, Hell on Earth, everybody. And I don't want to give a content warning for this, but I do feel like whenever people say Hellraiser, I feel like it's kind of the one franchise that a lot of horror fans probably haven't, delved into. It's more of a niche franchise than something like Friday the 13th or Halloween, right? Would you agree?
I think so, yeah. I like to say that this is kind of like the second tier of horror franchises.
Yeah, for sure. And I think, though, because more than 50% of the films in the Hellraiser franchise are garbage.
Pure garbage.
Most people, I'm generalizing here, but some people like to assume that the early ones aren't good either, and that is not the case. We're discussing what is the third best Hellraiser film. Oh, right. I forgot. You're a Bloodline apologist.
Yeah, so F you. Go back and listen to that episode from last year.
Yes, and if you did listen to the episode last year, I will say again, you don't have to have seen the first two movies to get this film or to understand this film, but they are better films than this film.
That is also true. Yes, I will agree to that.
But before I get too ahead of myself, we do have someone on deck to help us discuss this classic of horror cinema. So let's bring him on. All right, everyone. He is a writer at Rue Morgue, Daily Dead, and Cinepunks. And he's also a co-host of the Corpse Club podcast. Also for Daily Dead, he has a running column called Let's Scare Bryan to Death, in which he brings on a guest to introduce him to a horror movie he's never seen. Coincidentally, both Joe and I have been guests on that column showing him various fright flicks. Please welcome Bryan Christopher.
Good evening, gentlemen. How you doing?
Doing pinheady.
Well, I think that the worm on the pins and just everything about that scene is kind of indicative of what you're going to get from Hellraiser. I mean, indicative, it happens 2/3 of the way through the movie, but it also kind of is in line with how just exquisitely dumb this movie is, because the physics, or however you want to put it, don't work out with how long those pins are. They should be coming out the other side of his head.
Yeah.
Oh, right. Yeah.
This is definitely not your thinking man's Hellraiser movie. And it's, I would argue, maybe one of the dumbest movies you ever covered on here, which makes me touched that you chose me to help talk about it.
I don't know if I would say it's it's interesting. I do think it's a pretty dumb movie. I think it balances the tone between goofy and kind of gross out pretty well. The irony here, though, is that Clive Barker was worried about the director, Anthony Hickox, and his tone, because he had previously done a lot of horror comedies, and his fears kind of came to fruition.
Yeah. Okay, so clearly I'm going to be the person who defends this movie. Bryan, I thought that was your job.
No. Wait. I want to be perfectly clear about something. This is a really dumb movie. I can now say I love this movie.
No, I really like it too.
I've had to come around the corner on it a little bit. I used to not enjoy it so much, but it's a terrible Hellraiser movie. It is a fantastic movie, if that makes any sense.
Well, that's the key, right? This is not the movie that Hellraiser fans were wanting in a third entry from this franchise, and I think if you can divorce it from the dread and doom and gloom of those first two movies, because those first two movies are fantastic, legitimately great movies, horror otherwise, but they are so bleak and so upsetting. This one has elements of that, but I still think, because it's kind of just so dumb. I don't even want to say it's a laughable movie, I just find myself laughing at it a lot.
Yeah, I mean, I think what they've done is they've recognized that people were naturally gravitating to Pinhead as a character. So this is the movie that really puts him front and center and says, okay, we're going to combine the monster classic that is Pinhead with the slasher tropes that we've learned from, say, Nightmare on Elm Street, and we're just going to go over the top with the death sequences.
There's a lot of zingers in this movie from every single character, and I think that makes it feel very 90s to me.
Pinhead's got dad jokes in this one. Like, it's his it's this transition that I think he's going like Bond villain, and I think that really comes to fruition in Bloodline. But yeah, there's definitely like a lot of pontificating and a combination of just kind of going off in these weird monologues along with some really goofy and cringe-inducing zingers.
Yes.
I'm gonna like jump way ahead to this Black Mass thing though. The zinger that actually works for me very well, and I think garnered a well-earned laugh from me though, is when she's telling the priest about the demons, and he's like, "No, they're just demons. Like they don't exist." The what the fuck was that? What the fuck is that? Like, that is an A+ line in my book. I fucking love it. No irony involved.
And absolutely,
it's also great delivery.
Yes, wonderfully delivered by Terry Farrell.
Well, okay, so I do have a lot of stuff to talk about with why this movie is the way it is, but I kind of wanted to also just, Joe, I mean, it's been a year since we discussed Bloodline, so I know we've kind of gone through our
Also a fantastic movie.
It's an ambitious movie. I wouldn't say it's fantastic. But I still do want to see the original cut, which, you know, we'll probably never see, but
we've been waiting a full fucking year at this point.
I know, it's been forever. But, Brian, what is your relationship with this franchise? I also know that you and Joe have discussed this franchise ad nauseum.
Yes.
Twice.
Oh, God. So, yes.
Recently.
3 times. We did as part of Corpse Club, we did a full franchise retrospective. Every single movie. We actually structured it like Dante's Inferno, so we took care of all the really crappy ones first, of which there are many. We covered the middle ones second as kind of like purgatory, so we did, this was part of that. We did Bloodline, we did Inferno, and then we covered the...
I know people really like Inferno, and it's the Scott Derrickson written one.
It's not good. It's not good.
It's so boring. Yeah. It is boring.
It just really starts that trend of turning Hellraiser into like quasi like Tales from the Crypt episodes, and it's also the first one where they were using a different script that they just shoehorned Pinhead into.
Right.
Yep.
So yeah, it's bad. All apologies to Scott Derrickson or Scott Derrickson fans. It's not a good movie.
Nope.
The final episode we did was on the first 2. And part of the reason I wanted to do that in the first place is Hellraiser is my favorite movie of all time.
Yeah,
it actually goes back farthest that I can remember. For whatever reason, my parents thought it would be okay for someone who I can't imagine I was older than 4 or 5. I think it was just kind of one of those, they were watching it, I was in the room, they didn't really give a shit. So some of my earliest memories of horror movies are like Pinhead picking up the pieces of Frank's face. And so what I love about the original is just how it's evolved for me over time, and my understanding of it has evolved. Where it used to be a movie about these, really gnarly, mutilated demon monsters. And as I've gotten older, I've realized that, they're kind of more background characters, and the story is really about the Cottons. And if you really want to put a fine point on it, it's really about Julia.
Yes.
And so a movie that can evolve like that over time while still maintaining those really fantastic visuals is just something I will never get sick of. And so, yeah, this movie is not the original. It's definitely not the original, but it's still got a lot in it that I really enjoy.
Yeah, well, that's fantastic. Listeners, if you want to know Joe and I's relationship with the franchise, please go back and listen to our episode on Hellraiser Bloodline from last year. That one, honestly, probably works better if you have seen the first 3, because we are dealing with 3 different time periods in that movie. But nevertheless, that film does actually complete the Pinhead saga, which makes all the sequels kind of superfluous, but I digress.
And then there's this one, which is like a weird entry because it does activate on a lot of your assumed knowledge of particularly the second one, the one that precedes it. Mm-hmm. But then it feeds directly into 4, and it has a lot of little callbacks to 1 as well. So I like this as a sequel that doesn't hit you over the head by being like, I'm a fucking sequel. You need to know all of this lore and literature.
Well, I agree to an extent. I will say that I remember this movie being a bit more fast-paced, and I do think the first act of this movie, because we don't get Pinhead, like, Doug Bradley does not speak in this movie, really, until the 30-minute mark, because the first 30 minutes are catching Joey, our Terry Farrell, up to speed on the mythology, and thereby catching us and the audience up to the speed. Right. So the first act of this movie does drag a bit for me, but there was a reason for that. Mm-hmm. And I will say, so yeah, we'll go into the development now, and honestly, it's kind of Claire Higgins' fault that the movie is like this.
But Julia, no!
Yeah, listeners, Claire Higgins is the actress that plays Julia. So I have the Scarlet box set. This is an Arrow set that came out in 2016, 2015, I think, and it is a stacked Blu-ray set. I'm honestly a little bummed that they don't include Bloodline because that was the last theatrical one.
Perfect. Yeah.
Well, apparently because fan reaction was so bad, people hate Bloodline so much that they were like, well, why the fuck would we spend any time doing this? Ugh. Again, I get that, but I'm also like 1 through 4 are one complete story. Yeah. I just think if you're gonna do a set, like, it's okay if no one likes it, just complete the fucking story.
And like, were people really doing fucking backflips over 3 that they had to include it?
Yeah.
And Brian, honestly, Trey showed me the extras on this third film.
Oh my god.
And I am watching my basic as fuck DVD from back in the day that doesn't even have subtitles. Like, that's what you can get if you only get Hellraiser 3 as a standalone. And it blows.
I'm really happy though, because so this set, I bought it for like $70 when it came out, and now it is out of print, and it is about $350 on eBay right now.
Just a reminder, listeners, my birthday is coming up.
There are a lot of extra features. There's one 30-minute documentary just on the Hellraiser. It's not even like a joint documentary for the first 3. It's just on Hellraiser 3.
Wow.
There's an interview with Paula Marshall. There's an interview with Doug Bradley. And there's also a 200-page book that comes with this thing. Wow. Granted, it's for all 3, so each movie gets about 67 pages of like material devoted to it, but half of that is the press kit.
Nice.
So it's 30 pages of press kit, 30-ish pages of like an actual write-up on the film. Nevertheless, it's really intense. Also, it does come with the unrated version of 3, which is 3.5 minutes longer than the theatrical cut.
Yeah, because I was reading the Hellraiser films and their legacy by Paul Kane, which is a really fantastic book that details, I want to say it's like the first 5 films, maybe a bit more, but he's done extensive work on the franchise, and he outlines scenes that I have never seen or heard from. So clearly they're in that extended draft.
The thing is, so like, it's one of those situations where the extra footage is actually like a much lower quality, and it goes to pan and scan like the 4:3 ratio once you get them. Okay. A lot of it is actually just extensions of scenes. Like, there's actually like when she first gets the Vietnam like flashback, there's a lot more footage of her walking around and seeing corpses. So I'm assuming it was cut for pacing.
Right.
Honestly, if there's like a full-blown new scene in it, they must have upped the quality on it, because I couldn't tell.
Yeah. Okay.
So Trace, when you say there's more of her walking around in Vietnam looking at corpses, now did you mean when she's actually walking around in World War I, or did they actually have a point where she not only walked around looking at corpses in World War I, but there was also a separate section where she's walking around looking at corpses from her Vietnam vision?
World War I. You were correct. I needed that correction.
I only say that because I wouldn't put it past this movie to do that.
No, you're right. And I will confess, I'm not a war movie person, but it was interesting, though, when I was watching this, and you get the World War I, and I was like, wait a minute, I thought it was a Vietnam thing, because you could tell based on the outfits, though, and I guess maybe what the war zone looks like, that it takes place, like, whether it's World War I or Vietnam. I guess World War I is what, the teens, the 1910s?
It was the trench that gave it away for me.
There you go.
The trench is World War I. The Vietnam is the first one, and you can tell because they're leaning heavily into that Miss Saigon helicopter action.
God. Also the trees. I feel like Vietnam War, like there's always the trees that give Vietnam away. I don't know. Okay, so this movie was actually in development before Hellbound was even released in theaters in 1988. So, New World Pictures, which was the distributor, and Film Futures, which was a production company owned by Clive Barker and Chris Figg, they held meetings about the film. And Barker originally wanted the Hellraiser sequels to focus on Julia. Like, that, They were like, this is what this franchise is about. There were like 6 different versions of this script. One of them, like the opening scene, had like the camera coming up to a woman from behind as she was at a vanity, and she opened the drawer, and inside the drawer was a bunch of different faces, and she would try them on, and it was Julia.
This is just going to bum me out knowing what this movie could have been now. I almost don't want to hear this.
So Higgins declined to reprise her role for a 3rd film. So when they were having these discussions, she was like, I really don't want to be the face of a horror franchise. I'm out.
Yes, and in her defense, she is a classically trained British actress, so she probably didn't realize, like, oh, okay, I guess I'm signing on for multiple pictures of this weird horror franchise.
Absolutely, and that's why so in the later drafts of Hellbound, she was killed off. And they also realized that fans were going towards the Cenobites. They wanted Pinhead. Their thing that they always said was, oh, if you showed someone a picture of Claire Higgins as Julia, most horror fans would be like, what? Who's that? But if you showed them Pinhead, they knew that was Hellraiser.
Yeah.
Yeah. So there were going to be a couple different ideas. They were going to have a story where it was set in ancient Egypt. That was Clive Barker's idea, where it was about, like, Pinhead attempting to resurrect himself. There was a building that functioned as the limit configuration, blah, 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 blah. So during these talks, 20th Century Fox demanded extensive cuts to Barker's latest film, Nightbreed, which is an adaptation of the novella Cabal, which we have not discussed on this podcast yet, but listeners, we have written about it, so you can go find our article on it on Bloody Disgusting.
We'll get to it one day.
One day. I'm not gonna lie, y'all. I like it fine. I just kind of find it a very, like, long, drawn-out viewing experience that I don't want to revisit very often.
We need a couple years in between.
I really do.
It's serviceable. Yeah, I enjoy it. Yeah.
I feel the same way about Lord of Illusions, which we did cover last year. So that was like, we're getting in like a Barker a year, and I'm fine with it. Actually, we did 2 Barkers last year, so fuck everyone.
Wait, did we? What was the other Barker?
Bloodline. I mean,
I guess involved in Bloodline.
I know, but okay, but it
you know, he would slap you right in the face if he was here when you said that, right?
Probably so, but it's okay.
You could have said Candyman 2. He's closer to Candyman 2 than he is to Bloodline.
So, following a misleading marketing campaign from Fox that promoted Nightbreed as a slasher film, Nightbreed underperformed, that's putting it mildly, at the box office, and that caused Film Futures to go out of business. At the same time, New World was going through bankruptcy as well, so Hellraiser III languished in development hell. Former New World executives, including Lawrence Kuppen, established Transatlantic Pictures, and the rights were transferred to them. Now, the problem is, this was later. So basically, when New World collapsed, the rights went with them. And it took them 3.5 years to figure out who owned the rights to this franchise.
So mind-baffling. Like, who owns the rights to this major franchise? We don't know.
I mean, that's the thing. Like, you have to. It's like, isn't it like in a contract somewhere? Like, if this company goes bankrupt, then the rights divert to X person, X company. I don't know.
I guess you would think so, but presumably they never thought they would go bankrupt, so they never wrote it in.
Yeah. So, okay. Basically, after disagreements at Transatlantic, Barker had no official involvement with this film initially. First, the studio balked at his fee because they wanted a cheap and nasty film, so they paid Clive Barker $20,000 to have no involvement with Hellraiser 3.
So rude.
Wow.
Tony Randall, who's the director of Hellbound, he co-wrote the story for Hellraiser 3 with Peter Atkins. Atkins completed the first draft of the screenplay in 1991, and Randall says that, like, there was one draft that he was really happy to get rid of because I guess because there have been so many drafts at this point, one of them actually made its way onto the black market. To the point where when, like, Doug Bradley was doing the convention circuit, people would come up and have him sign copies of the black market Hellraiser 3 script instead of copies of Hellbound.
Oh, weird.
Mm-hmm. So, okay.
Take that, Scream.
Tony Randall is attached to direct this movie, but the producers removed him after they became worried that his vision for the film was too bleak. They thought it was too depressing, too dark, too gory, blah, blah, blah.
Give us a slasher.
Yes, so then they were like, yeah, they wanted to cheapen it. They wanted to bring the franchise out of cult status and attract the mainstream and also attract a younger audience, which is why the setting for this movie is primarily at a nightclub.
Because it's hip.
It's also why it's set in America, because they're like, fuck the Brits. Americans want to see Americans.
That's always what they do in those 90s like horror movie posters when they have like the Fox TV review blurbs, and it's like fun, hip, and scary.
And apparently in the most abandoned section of New York City I've ever seen in my life.
Yeah, aka North Carolina.
I have so many thoughts about that, but yeah. So they bring on Anthony Hickox to replace Randall after a mutual friend, whom Hickox had cast in his last film, Waxwork 2: Lost in Time, suggested him. Now, Hickox actually grew up in a film family. His dad was director Douglas Hickox, who's directed a bunch of shit, but he also directed the Vincent Price film Theater of Blood. His mom is Anne V. Coates, who's a noted Hollywood editor. She actually edited the films Lawrence of Arabia, The Elephant Man, and 50 Shades of Grey.
One of these things is not like the other.
He also had a love of Hammer horror, which is actually his defense at the Black Mass scene, which caused a lot of controversy. So Transatlantic then finally invited Barker back on board, but he declined because he didn't like Hickox's prior work and believed him a poor fit for the series because he was known for horror comedy. Hickox flew to Barker and met with him and was like, dude, look, I'm going to take it seriously. We're going to be good. So Barker was like, okay, fine. I approve of you. But then after that, Barker didn't hear from anyone involved with the film for 9 weeks. So they go through pre-production, they go through filming. Barker is not involved. And he still got his $20,000 paycheck, so he's good. They also had new Cenobites involved because they didn't want to bring over a lot, and also new crew. So while the first two films you can see like an aesthetic that kind of matches, not the case with this one because they didn't want to bring the crew over from Britain.
Right.
Yeah.
So, yeah, this is the first film shot in the United States. Transatlantic gave Hickox 6 weeks to shoot the film. This shoots in the fall, like September through November of 91. In, as Joe said, North Carolina, which stood in for New York City.
As it does.
Seamlessly.
Hickox had previously established a very fast shooting schedule, which used long hours, so they had to adjust to his unorthodox style and studio's demands. Apparently, Bradley worked for 17 hours straight one day. They also shot with in-camera editing, so like instead of like shooting out of order based on like people's availability and stuff, they shot the entire movie in sequence, which is kind of a pain in the ass. They also used stages for a lot of the sets, and they were all next to each other. So when they were trying to film scenes at the same time, they couldn't because the sound was going over between the stages.
It's the problem when you got Motorhead.
I know. So they're looking for a U.S. distributor. Miramax becomes interested in distributing the film, but what happens next is contentious. I know. So this is Bob and Harvey Weinstein getting involved with the Hellraiser franchise in the third entry.
Again, Trace, back-to-back weeks. I was going to make a joke that, like, every year we should document, like, who have we covered the most on the podcast, and guess who it is? It's the fucking Weinsteins.
It's terrible. But, you know, honestly, I feel like what they did on this film made it turn out better than it would have. So what happens next is a little bit contentious because no one can really agree on who suggested what. According to Hickox, the director, Bob Weinstein loved the rough cut he saw, which was about a 2-hour film, and offered Hickox money for additional effects work and to redo the ending. This resulted in the early use of CGI, the first in a horror film apparently, to add several gory scenes. Barker, who now is coming back into the film, disputes this account and says that Cuppen showed him a work print, and he was unimpressed. Barker declined an executive producer credit after Cuppen offered, suddenly scared that the film was going to be bad. Barker then criticized the film's ending and the low-budget effects work. So then Barker says that Weinstein actually came to him personally, asked for his honest evaluation of the film, and Barker reiterated the criticisms, and at Weinstein's urging came back in to fix the film. They offered $500,000 for an extra week of shooting, which took place in February of 92, and that's about 3 months before the film's premiere.
So depending on who you believe, it was either so good they were given more money for reshoots, or it was so bad they were given more money for reshoots.
And who can say?
Well, and also good for Barker because he got 2 paychecks, one to go away and one to come back.
I mean, I love this. Queer creators get that money.
I mean, I do like that. Yeah, he was very possessive of his property, rightfully so, and that's great. Like, he stood his ground.
Well, I think part of it, too, is that I think he realized by this point that he had made a mistake giving up the rights to Hellraiser, which is something that, you know, we got to talk about happily. Last year, he actually got the rights back, which is why he's involved with some of the upcoming Hellraiser productions. But, like, basically, he wasn't going to get money from these films, so he had to make ways to get money.
I can't believe there's productions, plural, happening with Hellraiser. Yes.
I'm so excited.
I'm getting a movie and a TV show, folks.
Yes.
All right, so to close this out, in Barker's account, he was the one responsible for Farrell's bondage scene. Additional scenes of extended gore in the nightclub massacre, so you'll see a lot of insert shots there of random people getting killed. That apparently is Barker's fault. Responsibility? I don't know. It's good. It's good that they're there.
There we go.
The CGI when Lee's character is skinned and many insert death scenes. Okay, yeah, there we go. Regardless of the extent of Barker's involvement in post-production, it was now enough for him to accept an executive producer credit, and the film was given a Clive Barker Presents banner.
Right.
So yeah, this film, after premiering, like for, I guess, LA in May of 92, does open on September 11, 1992. We are looking at a runtime of 93 minutes for theatrical, 97 for unrated, and a budget of, this is the weird thing. So Wikipedia is telling me $12 million.
Mm-hmm.
In the Blu-ray set on the features, they say specifically $4 million.
Oh, it's not $4 million.
Well, but I'm wondering if the Wikipedia amount is adjusted for inflation. Because $4 million in 91 would have probably pulled this off. And also, they said it made a profit, and this movie made a domestic gross of $12 million. So,
I mean, I guess they probably weren't spending a whole lot on the cast. There wasn't anybody, I think, that would have been pulling that big a salary at that point anyway.
Yeah. I guess just Doug Bradley, and then they moved the production to North Carolina, where I'm sure they probably shot it as cheaply as possible.
Probably so. I mean, I will say, I actually think this film looks good. I think Hickox directs it fairly well. Like, plot aside, whatever the fuck you want to say, just as a piece of cinema, I think it's, again, my go-to phrase, competently made.
I think it's more than competently made. People can hear me gush about this on the Corpse Club episode, but this is a really stylistic film when you think about the deep focus and the way that he's using the camera. Like, he didn't have to insert all of these flourishes and make it as visually compelling as he does. He could have just filmed this like a stock and slash.
Yeah, I got to give, I guess this would be credit to cinematographer Jerry Lively. There's a lot of really interesting like whip pans and just like really deep, I don't know exactly how you describe it, but like the close-ups in this movie that have kind of like that fisheye lens.
Yeah.
Oh, and a lot of split diopter as well.
Mm-hmm.
So yeah, there's definitely some effort in how they shot this movie.
He's definitely a man that keeps the same... I mean, he really hasn't done much since this movie. I think the only thing he did after this that was of note was Warlock the Armageddon. But he does keep Jerry Lively and his editor, Christopher Sibeli, like around for all of his films. So it's like, again, it's kind of a Mike Flanagan situation where it's just the same crew over and over and over.
Yeah. Well, that's good. I mean, I guess if you have a good working relationship, you might as well.
Yeah. So, this opens at the number 3 slot with $3.2 million, goes on to gross $12 million. It will not be the last Hellraiser film to go to theaters. That will be Bloodline. It does get pretty bad reviews. Rotten Tomatoes, we're looking at a 39% with an average score of 4.11 out of 10. Letterboxd is a bit kinder, and I actually see that a lot of people in our horror circle do seem to like this movie, but we're looking at an average score of 5.4 out of 10.
I think people recognize this film for what it is. It's dumb fun. It's not going to make you think too hard, but it's an enjoyable 90-ish minutes.
And it's also just an ill-advised endeavor from go. Like the idea of trying to make something like Hellraiser into a slasher movie, it's just not going to work the way you want it to.
We'll also make it mainstream, right?
Because I think, like, if I remember correctly, when we were talking about it on Corpse Club, Joe, like, even the first one only has a Rotten Tomato score of, like, 72%, which is, it's good, but it's not, like...
It should be in the 90s.
Yes, yeah. But it also shows that there is a specific audience for this. So the people who love it are absolutely going to love it, but not everybody's going to love this. So to try and transition to that into some kind of a mainstream franchise is just not going to work.
Yeah, there apparently was an early draft of this, or somebody maybe at Miramax or one of the production houses were like, I envision Pinhead walking down the street and just like getting the chains into a bunch of like thugs and teenagers. And I'm just like, what Hellraiser are you talking about, sir?
Oh, man. And you see the way it plays out on TV, it just like when you bring these characters out into the real world, it just looks kind of ridiculous. Like, it's interesting, and I had a lot of fun with it, but it's also like, it looks like a bad Photoshop watching Cenobites walk down Main Street, whatever town in North Carolina they were in.
I love the set. This movie actually does kind of excite me because it's almost like, I'm going to say good fan fiction, where it's like a what if Cenobites in the city.
Right, yeah.
A Cenobite night on the town.
Yes, I think it's when the cops pull up and they all blow up. I got like really excited in my couch, like rewatching this movie. I was like, oh, this is like really fun.
Oh, it's so silly. Like that lady police officer being like, shit, gasoline!
And then just standing
Just
there
so dumb.
blankly.
Yeah. Yeah, say the line and then stand there, wait for pyrotechnics.
Hold. Now.
It's great. So yeah, I don't think it's as much of a clusterfuck as Bloodline is, because again, I think our explanation of the production of Bloodline was like twice as long as this, but it's a movie that feels like one complete vision at least, which is more than I can say for Bloodline.
Yeah, you can feel the meddling with Bloodline.
Yeah.
Sadly.
But that's also an editing problem too.
Oh, yeah. Yeah.
But yeah, let's go.
Let's begin. So we open on J.P. Monroe, who is played by Kevin Bernhardt.
Like a shiny brick of muscle.
Oh.
With silver tipped red cowboy boots.
And the underwear is like a very unique choice.
Oh, it's International Clothiers. Them some silk boxer shorts, baby.
All right.
I also just appreciate the way like his brand of obnoxious isn't even trying to hide itself. Like he's not really trying to be charming. He's just like, yeah, I'm rich. I get what I want, and I can just be a prick all the time, and people accept it because I'm wealthy and good looking.
Yeah, it is interesting to see how many people compare him to Frank from the first two films. And I'm like, oh, I see it. He's charming. He's good looking. He gets what he wants. But like, this is the American version of that. Like, he is a sleazy character. I also think it's great that Kevin Bernhardt got his start working on multiple soaps, because I'm like, oh, I can see it. The face. Yes.
Yeah, like 100+ episode run on General Hospital, I think it was.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
General Hospital. He was also in Dynasty, the original, the OG Dynasty, for like a handful of episodes.
By the way, I don't know if y'all have seen his his current IMDb photo, but has aged quite well.
I did, because I find him very attractive in this movie, so I
Yes.
really wanted to see what he looked like now.
Yeah. He's still got it, folks. He's still got it.
He's a silver fox, I think, now.
Mm-hmm.
I did want to point out, though, so this movie actually does open on the title card, and we get the score. It is a different composer than who we've had before. It's his name is Randy Miller. He worked on Darkman 2 and 3. Make of that what you will. But the title track, and I don't know if, Joe, you got a chance to go back and listen to Jason X, but it reminds me of the Uber Jason theme from Jason X. And so I guess, in retrospect, Jason X's Uber Jason theme reminds me of the Hellraiser 3 theme.
There we go. Credit where credit is due, sir.
Well, I mean, it's the same basic theme. It's just done on like a crappy 90s synthesizer, right?
How dare you, sir? He went to Russia.
Well, I was going to say, actually, because we could quibble that Jason X is 2002, but they filmed it in 99.
Oh, no, I was talking about Hellraiser 3.
Oh, yeah, no. I mean, I think they're both the same thing. I think it's the same thing. Harry Manfredini ripped off Hellraiser 3.
Yes, but I think Brian is referring that it's the same theme from the first two films.
Yes.
Oh, is it really?
Yeah,
Well,
I mean, it's the same
samples
basic.
a fair amount.
Yeah.
Gotcha. Yeah. I haven't seen the first two since I marathoned this franchise 2 years ago.
Yeah, and you did it in the wrong order because you started with the good ones.
I will say that y'all probably did do it the right way by doing the back half first.
Well, I only did it
so
that way
same.
because I knew damn well if I tried to do it in order, I just wouldn't finish. I would probably get to like, I don't know, maybe 6 and go, fuck this.
So, yeah, my friends and I like to do marathons, be it either franchises or like via themes, and I can confidently say that Hellraiser was the worst one in the sense that like none of us wanted to keep going after a certain point.
Yeah, you start to feel like you're the one who's being punished as you get into those later entries.
I mean, the problem is there, and like y'all liked Hellworld on y'all's. Like, I mean, again, liked relatively speaking compared to the others. I hate Hellworld so much, but the problem with so many of them is that they're boring.
Yeah.
That's the issue, and at least with this one and Bloodline, like they're not boring. I can say that for them.
They're not quite Hellraiser films, but they're also not just film noir dressed up with Pinhead in a corner.
Yes.
And that's the important thing. Like, you're right that we don't get a ton of Doug Bradley in this opening first act, but like, at least we're going to fucking get him, and he's still going to act like a Hellraiser character.
I will say too, so there is a documentary that covers like the franchise in general on this Scarlet box set, and they have Doug Bradley on here. They don't have Clive Barker, but the two most prominent names that feature in this documentary to go like talk to them about like the themes of Hellraiser and what the franchise means are Scott Derrickson and Carrie Werrer.
Love me some Carrie Werrer. To be honest, it'd be the only reason that I would ever cover that film in the future.
And I will say that for me, Deader, the one she's in, it's one of the VOD installments. It's not the most egregious, but it also suffered from like it was in the middle of just the turd sandwich that was the rest of those movies. So at that point, I just kind of lumped it in one big blur of crap. But I don't think Deader is nearly as egregious as like Hellseeker was in terms of the way it bombed.
Right.
No, actually, you're right. Sorry. Yeah, Hellworld is my second list here. Hellseeker was my worst
Thank
one.
you, Trace.
No,
Yes.
Inferno is the worst. Then Hellseeker.
I mean, again, it's not great, and I have it at the bottom, but like Hellseeker, because it not only fucks up the franchise, but it fucks up Kirsty Cott.
Yes.
Oh yeah, that is true.
And it's boring.
And it fucks up Pinhead. Like, it's a movie that presents the idea that Pinhead is after Kirsty Cotton for a couple of decades, and then she just kind of tosses 5 randos at him, and he's like, yeah, that's cool. That works for me.
Yep. And it makes her unlikable. I mean, I get that her husband was a douchebag, but no.
And also, I'm going to put a pin in this conversation because we have lost everybody who doesn't know anything about those old films. So, folks,
Yes,
come back to
I'm
us,
sorry.
come back to
So
us.
he buys a pillar. He buys a pillar for like $100.
Yes, he goes to this pyramid gallery in the middle of the fucking night. You can tell he's a connoisseur of art because he's smoking indoors.
So everyone is smoking indoors in this movie.
Bear in mind, these were different times you were allowed to smoke indoors, but all I could think of was like, you're there to buy art and you're just muddying it with your disgusting cigarettes. Dude.
Yes, you're going to upset the homeless man that runs the store.
Oh, yes.
God. Yep.
This franchise has an uncomfortable history with the way that it uses transient people.
Yes, unhoused people regularly just wander into pet stores and eat crickets out of the tank.
Yeah, it's very proper in that way. Like, don't trust people who don't have money. They will try to sell you something that will murder you later.
There were a series of different comic books that came out in the Hellraiser universe, and there was one that started kind of really world building on Hellraiser and the whole mythology, and they actually put forth like the homeless people. It's like this network of demons that they're the ones who like make sure the box gets into the right hands, and they're also like the homeless disguise, or however you want to call it, is covering up that they're actually that flying skeleton demon that kind of comes out of nowhere at the end of, when the homeless guy kind of melts and the winged demon comes out of it. Like, there's a whole like fleet of those in the comic book version. They took it to some interesting places in terms of like taking a lot of like throwaway ideas and making it something that was more connected and cohesive.
Right. Which is, I think, why I like these first 4 films, because they do feel so different from the other kinds of horror films that we were getting, not just at the time, but in terms of like franchise potential. They never seemed quite content to just rest on their laurels, even if what they were giving us was a bit of a hot mess.
Well, but I also like that they all feel so distinct from each other, right? Like, I mean, 1 and 2, you could technically watch. Sometimes I consider 1 and 2 like part 1, part 2. Like, it's just the first half of a movie and the second half of a movie. But the second one is so much more bonkers than that first movie, which is why I like it more.
Yeah.
But, like, they all feel so different, and they're doing their own thing with the material to varying degrees of success. But I can still respect it for that.
Yeah. Yeah, we'll leave it at that. We'll say, yes, we respect them. They're not always successful in that regard.
Yes.
Okay, so he gets this Pillar of Souls, and on it we can see there is an image of the puzzle box as well as Pinhead, who is, of course, played by Doug Bradley. And we saw this pillar at the end of part 2, how it got from the UK to here in quote-unquote New York City.
We don't know.
So let's meet our heroine, who is an ambitious reporter by the name of Joey, played by Terry Farrell, and she is hanging out at the hospital where things are very quiet, but at least she has her father figure, cameraman Doc, Ken Carpenter, and I'm going to refer to him as Dexter's dad for the remainder of the episode.
That is not who he is.
That's
though.
100% Jerry Remar. Or is it Jerry? No, what's his name?
James
James Remar.
Mm-hmm.
If I found out they were related, I would 100% believe that, because that is...
Yes. Thank you,
the
Brian,
first
for
thing
understanding my joke as opposed to Trace, who tried to explain it.
No, cut that out. Cut me out. I didn't pick up that at all. I did not pick up on that at all. But I will say I love this introduction for Joey.
Oh, it's great. It tells you everything that you need to know about her in like 2 minutes.
I also love how, like, again, this is New York City, and I get that they're making a point that this is like a quiet night at the hospital. This is must be like the smallest hospital in New York City. It is just like, what, a hallway and like one emergency
And one room.
One operating room. This is like Halloween 2 levels
Yes.
of ridiculous deserted hospital.
Well, I bet you this was on that soundstage they were filming on.
Oh, sure. Yeah.
What sucks is because I think this is a great intro for her. I do love like the way that like the climax with Joey. Although I do think that in the middle of the film, a lot of her scenes are stolen by Paula Marshall, because I'm actually more interested in Terry for most of this movie's runtime.
Yeah.
But yeah, this like she's doing this fucking like report in this deserted hospital, and she's like, "Oh, there's no bodies here. It's a mystery to me. A mystery how those assholes in assignment knew it. This is Joey Summerskill for Channel 8 Emergency Room. Very bored. No story. No life. Really, really pissed off."
I also love it because she's delivering this as she's being filmed by Doc.
Yeah.
But also, there's a nurse who works at this hospital, played by Dawn of the Dead Sharon Hill. And she's just like, okay, I guess I'll just lay out these Dead Ringer style operating instruments.
Yeah, and caress them lovingly, especially when I put down the hacksaw.
Well, that feels like Hellraiser, right?
It definitely feels like, oh, okay, these weird torture devices will become important in a couple of moments.
Yeah, it feels like someone who doesn't understand the tone of Hellraiser trying to duplicate the tone of Hellraiser.
Yep.
Yeah.
And failing in spectacular fashion in a way that is very entertaining.
There we go. So speaking of, the comm is interrupted. We've got a screaming man who gets rushed in on this gurney. He's got bloody chains that are attached. Of course, Joey gets her ankle caught on one of them. And this is also our introduction to Terry, who, as you said, Trace is played by Paula Marshall. She is accompanying this man. She tries to run away, and Joey's like, "Hey, what's the story here?" And she gets the name,
What's the
Boiler
scoop?
Room. What's the scoop? Yeah.
So, Joe, you asked me offline if I knew who Paula Marshall was, because you know her from Rob Thomas's short-lived TV show Cupid.
Yes.
Because in her interview, like, because it was from a couple years ago, I was like, she looks so familiar. I honestly think she just reminds me of Shawnee Smith.
Uh-huh. Yeah. I can totally see it.
Yeah, I think I'm just seeing Shawnee Smith, even though it's Pawnee partial. Paula Marshall.
Well, I don't think you're wrong there, because particularly in this film, she is styled to look like old school Shawnee Smith, right? Like, she's got a little bit of punk, a little bit of edge, but she's still sexy.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
Correct me if I'm wrong, she also had a stint on Veronica Mars, did she not?
Yes, but that will also be because she was in Cupid, because same creator.
Gotcha.
Yep. I guess Rob Marshall also likes to keep his friends close.
Rob Thomas, because Rob Marshall's the director of Chicago.
God damn it.
And Paula Marshall is the person who worked for Rob Thomas in
Oh
two
my
series.
God. If Rob Thomas married Paula Marshall, but then they were like, progressive, and he took her last name, then he would be Rob Marshall.
There we go. And maybe he could get the real Rob Marshall to then direct like a song and dance number.
There you go.
We figured it out.
I think we've made life make sense.
All right, so Terry is like, "Boiler room, bye." And then she leaves, and then Joey's like, "Cool, what's happening in here?" And this dude's head explodes.
It's great. It's a really, really cool scene.
I love the idea that they're trying to make us believe that she can't get any traction on this as a news story because she didn't get any actual video footage of it happening. There is a room of about, 6 to 8 medical professionals in there who have all witnessed this happen. I'm sure there are probably security cameras somewhere, but they just throw it away with it. I love the line of a producer in the next scene where he's just like, "This is television. If there ain't no picture, it didn't happen." Well,
Yeah.
seeing as TV works on video, I really don't know how you have that job, sir.
Yeah. I mean, this is also the dude who's basically telling her that she needs to show an inch more flesh if she wants to become an anchor woman. So I'm not sure we should take him at his word for anything.
I love how he's doing like a John Madden breakdown of how she crosses and uncrosses her legs during an interview.
Yeah, it's like, what news program are we watching here, sir? Is this Fox?
I'm also really perplexed because like she tells them like what she saw, and they're like, "There's no story there." I'm like, "What?"
Are you
Exploding
fucking
heads
kidding
happen
me?
in New York City all the time, Joey.
It's like, show some tatas, and then we're good. But no, just an exploding head. No, scrap that shit.
Do you have a picture of it? No, didn't happen.
It's like how we don't have enough skin on the camera. It didn't happen, so you don't get it.
I mean, maybe the movie's trying to be a condemnation on the patriarchy and male sexism in the workplace.
I mean, I was actually going to advocate that there is an uncomfortable feminist reading about how women are commodified in this, because if you look at all the women, they basically just get used up by men.
Or a pillar.
Or a pillar. I mean, a man in a pillar.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, there you go. He eats her, literally.
It sure as fuck does, yeah. Okay, let's move on so we can get closer to that scene. So Joey obviously goes to the boiler room because she's like, I'm a big city reporter. I want the scoop.
This is our first bit of unrated footage.
Mm.
We get an establishing shot of the club, which includes a dancer being topless.
Oh.
Ooh.
Boobies.
Okay, so I need to talk to you both about the size of this club, because this club includes a giant dance floor with a live band and go-go dancers, and then it's attached to a massive restaurant that has a live orchestra playing. What is this bar?
It also has a penthouse.
Which is also separate enough that if you're in any one of those other places, you don't hear the nightclub.
And the restaurant's like a really nice restaurant, too.
It's like 5-star dining, only populated by hoods. I love it. It makes no sense at all. And also, I'm imagining these two places are actually side by side, as you talked about, Trace. So I'm just like, oh, I can imagine them trying to shoot in that other location and being like, can someone please tell the band to keep it down?
Well, and not to be like a douchebag, but like Terry does not look like she belongs in this restaurant.
Well, I think they're making a point. I don't think that's necessarily you just being a douchebag. I think that's the movie. Like, they're trying to make a point of making it seem like she doesn't belong in there.
Well, because she's homeless.
Yeah, the film is playing with broad strokes when it comes to Terry. Like, we're sort of meant to assume that she's maybe been abused, that she is homeless, that she's maybe dabbling in drug use of some kind.
You know, I actually don't think so. Maybe I'm wrong, but I mean...
Because Joey sees a stash at some point, doesn't she?
Does she? I thought she was just a crazy smoker. Maybe I'm wrong.
I don't remember seeing drugs.
Okay. In that case, it could just be me.
I mean, but again, you know, I mean, like she is styled to look like someone who you think would be doing drugs.
Yeah, very much. Like, she's a bit of a bad girl. Like, one of the things that struck me the first time I watched this was how comfortable Joey is letting Terry into her apartment, because the film makes you want to be like, oh, don't trust her. She's going to steal from you.
Can I tell you the anxiety attack I had when the scene where she's making breakfast? And I'm just
oh
like,
my God.
Oh God, she's going to burn down the apartment. Like, the whole building is going to burn down. Get her out of there. Get her out of there. I can't. No.
And Joey has told you she does not own this place. It's a mortgage. Okay, so we're still at the Boiler Club. She has this interaction where she inquires about Terry and then she leaves her card with JP. I do love the way that she talks to him because she does not give him two fucks.
No, I mean, she's a really strong final girl. I think, and this is through no fault of Paula Marshall or Terry Farrell, but like, I think just because they're battling for screen time and also B-plots during the middle of this movie, it just takes some power away from Joey's arc.
And apparently there was a little bit of like a competitive, like a healthy, like a friendly competitive relationship between Farrell and Marshall on set.
Oh.
Mm-hmm.
So, you know, that might have also wound up impacting the way it kind of came together on screen. Like, not that they were nipping at each other or like mean or anything like that, but you do kind of get that sense of like, I'm going to outact you in this scene.
And also the sexual tension.
I mean, it's not Clive Barker without some queer content, is it?
Oh, there we go. I'm also going to make the claim that there's some incest drama going on in here, too.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
All right.
Okay, so let's get to our very first dream sequence, boys. We've got this saturated Vietnam set where Joey, dressed in this gorgeous white nightgown, she sees a helicopter abandoning her father and other American GIs under fire.
Snooze.
Ooh, it does not look like Vietnam, but you know what? That's okay.
I guess we do need it for the ending and the Pinhead trick with the dad, but
But narratively, there was no payoff for this. They had to figure out some way. It's like they knew the beat that she had to give the box to him, so they reverse engineered some way of how can he trick her into giving him that box, and that's what they came up with, and it is just not narratively satisfying at all. It is a waste of time.
And the thing is, another movie did this exact same trick but way better, and that would be Nightmare on Elm Street 3.
Yes.
Oh right, yeah.
Yep. Yeah, that's actually what I was thinking too.
Mm-hmm.
And that came out well before this.
Yes.
Yeah, it was 5 years before.
I will say, I think the only other reason that this is in here, I don't know that it needed to be weird dream stuff with war sequences. I know that Paul Kane in the Hellraiser book tries to make the argument that this is an embodiment of the hell on earth that is the subtitle of this film.
Oh, I get it. But see, in that case, though, you make this a war movie. If you want to do that.
Like a World War I Pinhead.
Cenobites on the battlefield.
Ooh.
Honestly, no, that's what they should have done with the sequels. I'm sorry we're back on the sequels, but I'll shut up. But it should have been Cenobites in blank. Just Mad Lib it, and there's your sequel.
Cenobites in the snow.
No,
Cenobites on a cruise ship.
Make a bunch of police procedurals and have Pinhead in it at the end.
Oh, God. Yeah. Let's settle on the cheapest one. That's also the least interesting. Go with that. Yeah.
Yeah.
I will also say this sets up her daddy issues. So she's been abandoned by her dad, who was killed in Vietnam. She's looking for a father figure in the cameraman, and then she finds it in Elliot Spencer, a.k.a. Human Pinhead.
So your incest theory is that she was in love with her dad while she was a little girl before he died in Vietnam.
No, my incest reading is that Elliot Spencer, who's a surrogate father figure, is invading her dreams, and she's in this white virginal nightgown, and there's a little bit of sexy overtures there.
Okay.
I think they say in the movie that he died before she was even born, her actual dad.
Well, I was trying to do the math, because if this is 92, Vietnam was the late 60s, early 70s?
Yeah.
It's not my war, so I don't know.
No, that would have made sense then, yeah. Because let's assume she's 22 in this movie, so she's born in 1970.
Because that was one of the story beats is that she realizes it's not her dad and that it's Pinhead because he knows her name and her dad would have never actually known her name.
Oh, yes. Okay.
Right.
Mm-hmm.
God, we need to pay attention to this Hellraiser 3.
The sparkling dialogue, folks.
Why the hell am I paying this much attention to Hellraiser 3 is my question.
I will say, though, to be fair, Terry Farrell would have been 28 when they were filming this.
Yeah, I mean that tracks.
Which means if we're going by Hollywood ages, if she was 28, then she probably
17.
should have been giving
Cenobites in high school.
There's your movie.
No, that's literally just every other horror franchise, sir.
Hellraiser High.
Oh God!
Give it to me now.
Oh dear. Okay, so Joey is awoken by a phone call from Terry, so the dream ends, and then Terry pops over for this late night chat, and they analyze Joey's dream. They're getting along very, very well, and then this is where Terry pulls out the puzzle box.
I also love Terry implying, she's like, oh, did your dad,
Yeah, no.
Mm-hmm. I'm telling you, that's the
no,
setup.
he didn't molest me.
I've really come around on Terry. As a kid, I found her way too frantic, and she... I can't believe I'm talking about as a kid when I watched Hellraiser 3. But she's a lot more endearing now because you just realize how kind of desperate she is.
Mm-hmm. I like her.
It's not coming through necessarily as obnoxious. It's she clearly has nobody she can trust, and she wants so desperately to be able to anchor onto somebody.
I like her more than what's the blonde girl in 2, and I love 2, but the girl in 2 is kind of a cipher, whereas at least Terry feels like an actual character.
Oh yeah, I mean there's way too much surrogate mother shit going on in 2, and that girl is boring. Tiffany. Blah.
Yeah, Tiffany, there you go.
Through
at
no
least
fault of
Terry
the
can
actress,
talk.
there's just nothing for Tiffany to do except for open the puzzle and
Right.
Yeah, like this is a character who actually has a motivation and she gets to do things and she has a certain amount of agency. I think the biggest issue that I have with this film is that it builds up Terry and JP to fascinating, interesting dimensions. And then it's like, goodbye.
Yeah.
No, I 100% agree with you.
Yeah. Okay, so these two are hanging out. They're getting to know each other. They're getting a little domestic. Let's go back to JP's loft.
Unrated footage, an establishing shot again of this loft as construction workers are leaving, and they go, "All done, Mr. Monroe," and JP says nothing, and they go, "What a dick," and leave.
Yeah, that definitely sounds like it was excised for good reason. I will say, I love that he has installed this ugly as fuck scary pillar basically 10 feet away from his fuck pad.
Yeah, and
Yeah,
it's like,
great.
it's not even good flow. Like, it's in the way.
Yeah, like it is a fire hazard / you would walk into that thing if you were trying to go pee in the middle of the night.
It's in like what I'm assuming is supposed to be a sitting area. Like you would put a U-shaped couch up against the wall or like a sectional, and then this pillar is just in the middle of the floor blocking your view.
It's like, what are you saying, Trace? I can't see you. Just let me dodge to the left or the right. I gotta see around Pinhead. But it's a real talking point at parties, I bet.
Mm-hmm.
Which you can't have because you can't fit anybody in your goddamn place.
Oh,
There's
right.
this pillar in the center.
Well, and also, he's not inviting anyone over who has a penis, clearly.
True.
I mean,
That we know of.
a boy can dream.
Yeah.
I like how Trace is like, challenge accepted.
Just open up the hole. We're good.
Put the blindfold on, and you're good to... Wait, what are we talking about? Okay, so there's a rat hiding inside this pillar. He gets bitten. He sprays slow-motion blood over, and this is what wakes up Pinhead.
This is a Hellraiser movie that features a man having an extended battle with a rat on his hand.
Yeah, I also kind of wish we could have gotten the scene where we see that guy in the beginning pulling this puzzle box out of this pillar, because it seems like the pillar's hollow.
I do not understand. I think this is where Brian said the physics of this don't quite make sense.
Oh my god, you got your husband to watch this?
No, the Brian that's on this recording.
Oh, sorry.
Hi, Trace. My name's Brian. Have we met?
Should we all be wearing name tags? Oh wait, we can't see.
We can't see each other.
Damn this audio only.
It's okay. Okay, yes, Brian is correct. Not your husband, Brian, but this Brian is correct. The physics don't make sense.
Yeah, my Brian was like, what the fuck are you watching? Absolutely not.
Yeah.
There we go. That makes more sense.
There we
That's
go.
the Brian that I know.
Yeah. Okay, so Pinhead is officially awake, but he's not moving. He's not speaking yet. So let's cut back to the next morning. This is where Terry is actively trying to burn down Joey's apartment. I do kind of like it as a lesbian domestic scene, though. Like, we had this nice intimate evening, and now I'm making you breakfast, but I'm royally fucking it up because I don't know how to make toast.
Let's also go break and enter together.
Absolutely. The women who break and enter stick together, right?
I feel so bad, though, for this man that's walking the dog and is just dragging this dog down the street.
What is going on here? This is abuse, right?
Yes, it is. And on film. Caught on film.
I also remember watching that scene as a kid, and for whatever reason, I assumed because they gave him those really dark glasses that they were trying to imply that he was blind.
Oh no.
I thought the joke they were trying to make when he says, I see everything, is that he's like blind and he doesn't see anything.
That would actually be very much in keeping with the discussion we had about like the transient homeless people. Like,
Yeah,
let's
absolutely.
also have a seer in a blind man.
Mystical homeless.
Alas,
Yeah.
I was just an idiot and 8 years old and
Yeah.
watching a movie I probably had no business watching.
Oh dear. So they end up breaking in, which is kind of fun. I like that these women are just like, we're gonna do whatever we need to get this scoop.
And this is, I think, when the film picks up, though, right? Because they find the puzzle box drawings, and it's like, cool, off to the races.
Yeah. Name drop the Chenard Institute.
And I might add, Joey is wearing an amazing pant and shirt combo when they're going in there. She's got like this very like elaborate flowery pattern on her pants and a similar but like alternately colored top. It's just there's lots of like little flowers all over the place. It's a very interesting outfit.
I mean, the women's costuming, like particularly Terry's costuming, I'm not surprised that we're also drawn to her a little bit more because of the way that she is outfitted. She wears some of the most flamboyant and weird stuff in this movie. Mm-hmm. But it's nice that Joey gets a little flower going on here. Okay, so let's jump ahead to the evening. This is where JP fixes his eyes on Sandy, played by Amy Lee. She is a buxom blonde whose gold lame dress refuses to stay in place.
Oh, God.
As
gold
they
lame.
do.
I'm not going to lie. I think she has a great death sequence, and this actress is fucking terrible at delivering
she's bad.
She cannot wait for him to say his line before she is saying her line, and you're like, girl.
Well, also when she's walking, like when she's looking at the art, I didn't write down her lines, but it's delivered like, oh, this is good art. Yes, this is interesting art.
It's real dark. There's like a clear like 3 moment beats of just like real dark.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It's a bizarre inclusion. The sex scene is pretty fun. Apparently she did not sign on to be topless, and so that's why his hands cover her nipples the entire time.
Which, am I the only one thinking like I'd rather be topless than have some rando just like groping my tits for 3 minutes straight?
Because they're not placed on the tits. They are actively
like kneading
groping.
dough.
No, yeah. He is like groping hardcore, and I mean, again, not our body, not our choice, but me personally, like if it's like, okay, is my dick gonna just like lie there, or is someone gonna be like massaging my dick on screen? I'm gonna.
These are the options.
I mean, that's what the options were with their tits, I guess.
I'm not sure I would equate a dick getting stimulated on
I'm
screen.
I'm not equating. I'm saying that for me as a man, that is my only comparable. I can't compare it to my boobs because they're not actual breasts. Whatever. I'm sorry.
I mean, I guess I would have gone tit for tit, but yeah, it's a weird scene no matter which way you look at it.
Correct. And she gets eaten, and it is awesome.
Yeah.
Also, Trace, I saw you made a note that it's actually when her skin gets ripped off. Yeah. That's actually Paula Marshall in the skinless makeup.
Apparently so, and that's because, though, the CGI they added with her skin getting ripped off, that's one of, again, supposedly, Clive Barker's additions.
So it's a timing issue? Like they could only get Paula Marshall because she was presumably still on set or something?
Well, no, this is the work print. This is after they delivered the work print, so this is being shot in February of 92. I mean, sorry, the death scene itself is not, like, but it's just, like, the extra stuff. And I don't know, again, which parts of it, but yes, once the skin is removed, some of it or all of it is Paula Marshall.
I noticed that because I read that when you sent that tidbit. I was watching for it. I'm like, yeah, I can see in the eyes that's Paula Marshall. And it actually makes me appreciate Paula Marshall even more because it's like, not only was she game to do, like, the Cenobite makeup, she was like, yeah, sure, I'll do a skinless sequence thing that no one's going to know that it's me.
I will say, her interview, which is about 15 minutes long from 2016, she's really, really charming and very nice about everything.
Ah,
yeah, it's great.
It's so rare when you see Hollywood people are actually nice.
I mean, Clive Barker isn't on this thing.
He probably demanded an extra $20,000.
But, like, adjusted for inflation.
Right, yeah. I mean, depending on when it was filmed, he might have also been sick.
Oh, right.
But also, like, one of the interviews he gave on a very earlier version of the DVD, he was like, this is the last time I'm doing this. All right. This is my final word on this stupid franchise.
Like, I am done. Thank you. I've been fucked into the ground by this franchise. Yeah. Goodbye.
I mean, that's the thing, right? When he dies, his legacy is Hellraiser. Like, that is what it is.
I think for film people, if you like literature, I definitely think that you're going to give him a lot more credit for having a big oeuvre.
Oh, for sure.
Yeah.
Yeah. And just in case people are wondering, yes, also Candyman.
No, I know. Is Candyman, is it done as Clive Barker's Candyman? I know it's his property, but, like, he didn't direct any of them. He directed the first Hellraiser release.
I also always forget that because I think the short story it's based on, like, what they turned it into with the racial elements, like, none of that was in the short story. So I don't think there's going to be nearly that level of, like, legacy of connecting Clive Barker to Candyman the way he's going to get connected to Hellraiser.
Right. Yeah. And again, yes, there's Lord of Illusions. There's also Nightbreed, because Nightbreed is a bigger cult than Lord of Illusions, but it's Hellraiser.
Yeah, it's Hellraiser through and through. So in between the sex scene and the murder by Pillar, we do have a little bit extra with the Chenard Institute. This is the first instance where Terry thinks, oh, okay, Joey doesn't need me anymore. So it's a hint that she is susceptible to people abandoning her, and she has issues around that. Mm-hmm. And Joey's like, no, you're cool to stay.
Yeah, I wish this was the Terry Joey show, and I'm upset that we don't have it.
Yeah, and I think that's a testament to both actresses and what they're delivering, because you want to root for them. And also, JP is such a compelling villain that you're like, cool, I want to see him be Frank in this movie.
But no, he needs to be Julia in this movie.
Right, yes. Because that's honestly what it feels like they're setting up. And maybe they were just like, no, that's too similar to the first film, we'll get in trouble. But
yeah.
Or I could see, like, if they really wanted to do the tragedy of it, like, they could find a way of making Terry the Julia. Yeah, keep JP as the Frank, but kind of embracing it and realizing, like, have the tragedy of this be, like, everybody's going to abandon me, so I'm going to take care of myself by becoming just the next Julia.
Well, and the dynamic between her and Joey would make more sense, because it's different enough from the first one, because, again, Kirsty and Julia didn't like each other. Yeah. So you have then these two women who do like each other, one of them who is trying to, like, mentor, essentially, the other one, and she turns on it. That would be a great dynamic.
Right. And it sounds, weirdly enough, like not something that they ever considered. The plan was always to make it all about Pinhead and these new pseudo-Cenobites.
Yep, always.
And that moment just falls so flat, the reveal. You know, we'll get to it, I'm sure, more in depth.
Oh, when we get to Terry and JP?
I fucking hate it. I do think one of the other things that we need to acknowledge is, like, every time I watch this movie, I always think of Wishmaster, not just because of the way that the big murder sequences happen at the club, but particularly how Pinhead he's turned into a kind of djinn in this movie, where he's constantly tempting JP and Terry to be like, don't you want power? Come to the dark side. Embrace your bad impulses.
That's because he's stuck performing through, like, one of those, like, if you went to the beach and, like, put your head into one of those, like, paintings, like, he basically needs to spend the first, like, third of the time he's on screen acting through one of those things. So all he can do really at this point is talk.
Well, and also because the writer of this film, who also wrote 2 and 4, did write Wishmaster.
Yes.
There is that too.
I was trying to get there eventually.
Really, after Wishmaster, Peter Atkins was, like, out. He hasn't really done, like, a lot of anything notable since then.
Well, that's because he was turned into a Cenobite with barbed wire around his head.
Right.
There you go. Oh, yeah.
Fire breathing capabilities.
Baby Cenobite. Yeah. Baby head Cenobite. Yeah. Okay, yeah, so basically JP is now on board because Pinhead is like, cool, you fed me that chick, and now I'm going to give you power.
Again, we get some first one-liners too when he goes, Jesus Christ, not quite. I also love his, if you have a quality, let it define you, whatever it is. Okay, that's not how it works, but sure, we'll do that.
I also love how blatantly he's turning around that line on him that he said not 5 minutes before in the movie.
Yeah.
And he just fully buys into it. And it's just like, it's such a cheap ploy. And he just, like, JP just...
Hook, line, and sinker, man.
It is, but let's not forget that JP is a guy who woos women with roses that he keeps on ice behind the bar. He's not the smartest cookie.
My thing is this. Can you just hire people to get this pillar out of there? Like, just don't go near the pillar. Like, get a crane, drop it in, pick it up, drop it in the ocean. Like, as long as you stay away from it, it seems like you're fine.
Trace, you can't have movers in the Hellraiser franchise. That's how this all started.
Yeah.
That is a deep cut to number 1.
And I think number 2. I think there's movers in that.
Yeah, I do think there's movers in that one too, yeah.
The bed eats them. And I think what they're really getting to with this whole thing with Pinhead's head being in this pillar is toying with this idea that he's a manipulator. He's a master manipulator, and he's good at toying with people's desires and using that to his own ends. But it's also not who Pinhead is. Like, he doesn't really give a shit about manipulating people based off of the first 2 movies. It's, I know what I want. You've opened this box, so you think you know what you want. we're going to see how this plays out. You may or may not like it. I don't really give a shit. But they're really trying to lean more into like the serpent devil vibe, you know, and really leaning into kind of the more Judeo-Christian concept of hell here. And I think that's kind of where they're really losing the proper Hellraiser flavor.
Mm-hmm. It also hints at where the franchise will go and how it starts to lose a lot of its unique appeals, because Pinhead just becomes a judge and a jury and an executioner.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it loses that element of desire, and it's just going back to that idea of kind of punitive, but also like, I don't really care if you've sinned or not. I'm just going to hurt you because I'm evil.
Yeah. Yeah, it's a little unfortunate. Speaking of kind of unfortunate, our only glimpse of Ashley Lawrence's Kirsty is on deck, and this happens when Terry gets a tape delivered to her by Dexter's dad, and basically it's just Kirsty in an institution, because this is where all of our final girls end up if they survive. She's been institutionalized. She's talking crazy pants about how this box works. But I do like the visual symmetry of her talking about how to open it or how to solve it. And you also see Joey working through it at the same time. That's kind of fun. It's like a passing of the baton.
And one thing I will say, too, is that I don't think this is where she ultimately ended up, even disregarding that flaming turd Hellseeker.
Mm-hmm.
What I'm picking up is like, since this is from the Chouinard Institute, this I was seeing as like footage from when she first got to the Chouinard Hospital, like maybe between 1 and 2.
Oh, okay.
See, that's what I'm hoping, yeah, because I wasn't sure, but I choose to believe that because I don't like the idea of like Kirsty being an institution after 2.
And the reason I believe that is because I don't think there would be a Chouinard Institute after everything that happened there.
Right.
After hell opened up?
Yes. So I think, I think the tapes she's getting are archives from videos that they took between the events of 1 and 2. That's what I'm choosing to believe.
I like it. I like that a lot more.
I will say I have lots of questions about the puzzle box in general, though, especially when we get to the climax. And yeah, I'll leave it there.
Yeah. Fair enough. Fair. Okay, so while this is happening... Oh, there's also a quick shot of Elliot Spencer. So that's the human visage of Pinhead. And he just kind of like pops in after Kirsty's message to be like, hey, listen to her. She's telling the truth.
I do like that we get more of Doug Bradley like being a human in this movie. I think that's actually one of the movie's better choices.
I'd be interested to know like to what degree he pushed for that.
Well, and because there have been reports that he hated the makeup on this was the most uncomfortable for him, but he does say on this Blu-ray, he says that Hellraiser 3 is the best professional experience he's had in his life.
Yeah, it sounded like everybody just really got along on the filming of this, and even though it sounded hectic, and he didn't like his makeup, I think he was just really happy with the fact that he got to do more.
Yeah. And also be in America. That was honestly like the reason he was like, yeah, sure, is because he wanted to go to America.
Oh, yeah. So let's cut back to Joey's apartment. This is where Terry gets her own test. So JP calls and he's like, hey, baby, I want you back. And she's like, no, I'm good. And then immediately there's a out of context message that she overhears on the answering machine that's like, hey, Joey, you've got a promotion. Yay. And then Terry's like, oh, well, I guess I'm fucked. I'll go back to JP.
Unrated footage before she goes to his place. Terry is alone in a restaurant and she's drinking a cup of coffee or tea. It is not told which one, but basically it's an interesting camera shot where the camera is focusing on the coffee or tea and you see JP's face reflection like come into it and she looks up and goes, oh, hey, let's go to your place. And then we get to the theatrical cut again.
Trace, is there a particular reason why it's coffee or tea?
Well, because it's in a teacup, but it was black like coffee, like not brownish black like tea. So I was really, because it was the poor video quality, so I just couldn't tell.
Were you worried if you didn't like make that distinction? Like it could be either you were going to get an email like it was tea, motherfucker.
Someone's going to come up to me. Excuse me, she was drinking tea, sir.
Well, we do know what happens on Twitter sometimes, so it is entirely possible.
I don't know.
It is. I like to cover my bases just in case. I like to avoid all forms of confrontation.
Filled with rational, nuanced, well-reasoned conversation. I don't know what you're talking
about. Yep, that'll be it.
Always. Okay, we get another dream from Joey. This time we are officially in World War I because we're in the trenches. She wakes up, and this time Elliot's on her TV, and he's like, hey, you need to come and help me. But it's kind of already too late because JP has been setting things in motion. So Terry is now at the club.
Wait, what about the line, though, when he's like, oh, yeah, this pillar, I had a friend help me. She put her heart and soul into this.
And then they do the close-up with, like, the little stinger sound.
See, that is comedy, and that is what Hickox told Barker he wasn't going to do.
It just slipped through the cracks in one of the 6 different iterations the script went through.
Exactly.
Speaking of comedy that may or may not have been intentional, just going back really quickly to when she's having that nightmare about being in the trenches in World War I have to imagine there was someone whose job it was to throw prosthetic body parts at her during that scene, because there's literally just like piles of body parts just flying in the background and like hitting her in the back of the head.
Joe, I know you did not, but Brian, did you watch the Adam Sandler movie Hubie Halloween that hit Netflix last year?
I have not, no. I'm sorry.
Okay, there's a running gag where he's always on his bike going down the street and people just throw bags of dog shit at him. But it happens like 10 times in the movie. It's just this recurring gag. So I'm just imagining Joey walking through the trenches as people are just throwing like severed arms.
Throw it again. Harder.
But then one hits her in the face and she gets knocked over.
God. Honestly, this sounds like what we would get if this was set at high school, and it's like, Joey's the loser who works in the AV club. Throw dog shit at Joey. Oh, gosh. So, we are at JP's place. He is trying to lure Terry to this pillar, and she is not having it. But we do get the callback to Frank Cotton's classic pickup line, Come to daddy.
More comedy, too. When he's dragging her to the thing, he goes, watch your head on the steps.
He's
such a
he's
shithead.
compassionate. He cares about her.
Again, I mean, I'm not going to say it doesn't work, because I think it does work, because that's why I find it so entertaining. Like, this is intentional comedy. It just, like, it is not what Barker wanted, and that's what makes me laugh so much.
Like, what is it doing in this Hellraiser movie?
Especially with that come to daddy line, because it's like, it's so utterly unsubtle. Because like they do the full zoom into his face. He's just like, come to daddy. Like, yeah, we said it.
Yeah, check it off. Oh my God, I just came. I will say, though, I totally thought that Terry was just going to die here. So I do love the fact that she fucking brass knuckles JP.
Oh, yeah, it's great. No, I mean, it's a good little subversion, right? Because, yeah, you fully do expect that she's just another victim because we already have a final girl, blah, blah, blah. It does work here. Again, the problem is, like, we get Pinhead making a deal with her, but then she's out of the movie until she comes back for half a scene.
Yeah, it is nonsense. I don't know what they were thinking with this. Like, let's spend all these time with these characters, build them up. Who are you talking about? We've forgotten. They haven't been on screen for, 40 minutes?
I remember all of the stories about Bradley saying about how bad the pillar was, because he couldn't do anything except act with his face, and his face was frozen. He couldn't do shit. He's only acting in this pillar for 20 minutes of screen time, and again, that's like from beginning to end. Like, it's really less because not all 20 minutes of those are his.
Oh, you didn't watch the 20-minute cut where it's just Doug Bradley being like, "Oh God, I'm stuck in this pillar. I'm trying to get these lines out."
Every time we see the pillar in the first 30 minutes, it's not him, right? It's just the mold of his face.
Yeah, and it's like, no, Doug, we don't actually want you to move. You're supposed to be frozen in this scene. No, Doug, stop talking.
Yeah, they made him actually get into the pillar for those scenes. Stay still.
You're joking, right?
Stay very still.
It's very method.
He loved it.
Okay, so Joey then wakes up to some kind of dance party happening in her apartment, and she pulls back the blinds and she sees Limbo. So she goes through the glass, she sees the room where Elliot Spencer is bowed over the box from the 1920s. She has a little ghost chat with him about hell and her dad and who he became in his pursuit of pleasure. We get this Pinhead origin story that nobody asked for.
I know, but you know what? I like it. I like the idea of, a man who'd been through war, who had lost all faith in humanity, all faith in God, and was looking for something. I know we don't need it, but I do like it. And I think if we didn't have the extra scenes of him in human form, it wouldn't. If it was just they found a book or they were doing a microfiche research and they found this information, that wouldn't work. But at least because we have him here saying this story, it's great. There's also a little bit of extra footage here in the unrated cut too, where they're walking through an Indian street or something before we come back to the theatrical cut to finish his origin story.
And by Indian street, you mean a street in India, right?
Yes.
Okay.
Yes.
Which I'm sure was done very sensitively and used no stereotypes.
Well, it was supposed to represent where he bought the box from someone there. So, I mean...
Well, this franchise also has a bad history of that, where it's like, ooh, where's the scary, threatening box from? Mm-hmm. Somewhere in Asia.
Need to go somewhere exotic.
Yeah.
But question for y'all, though. So, because I know Hellraiser Judgment, the last one to come out, kind of went more into the rules of hell and stuff.
Mm-hmm.
I found that very interesting in that film. Do y'all want to know more about hell and the commandments and the laws of hell? Or are y'all like, no, keep this on Earth, give me like a human character to latch onto, and we'll go from there?
So I'll say this. That kind of brings us to the discussion about like the iterations that are, like the new iterations that are coming up. There's like the remake movie, and then there's a television series. What I would like is I would like the movie to kind of go back to its roots in terms of the erotic desires, the exploration, make that more of like, go back to the human roots of that and have the Cenobites be something in the background. The television series, I would love if they explored like Leviathan and like its inner workings and like what are the politics of the Cenobites in hell.
One thing is, whenever I would watch Judgment for the first time, again, everyone, this is the last one to come out, the one with this third actor playing Pinhead. But people were like, "Oh, it's Hellraiser paperwork," and I was like, I actually thought it was really interesting. I would watch more of this paperwork.
Yeah, it's done in a very like gross out, vulgar kind of way, but the underlying stuff about how Pinhead is just kind of a messenger who has a boss that he reports to, and there's like a hierarchy. It is interesting, and we do kind of get a sense of it here, right? Where the reason that we get these flashbacks in this origin story is because it tells us why he's able to command a troop of Cenobites, right? Like he is a general who is in charge of an army. And I do think it'd be fascinating to explore that the suits are not going to think that that's sexy enough. You've got to have Cenobites skinning people alive all the time.
Yeah, that's fair.
I don't like it.
But we got a club to massacre.
We sure do. Yeah, so we briefly learn, okay, you got to use this box, lure him into limbo, and then we're good. But shit is going down at the boiler room. So this is Barker's sequence that he did a lot of insert shots on, as you mentioned, Trace. Pinhead basically just kills everybody using his chains, but also other unusual weapons like ice from drinks and, of course, infamously, CDs.
So, can you imagine? This scene honestly still terrifies the living hell out of me, because I imagine being the very last person to die in that club.
Oh.
And having to watch every other person around me just get mutilated and just ripped to shreds, and just knowing like, I guess I'm next. Like that is so terrifying to me, and it's such an effective use of like, if we're gonna bring the Cenobites out of kind of the shadows and out of these smaller stories, watching that at play in this enclosed space, I think was the way to do it. Like it gets a little silly for me when they're in the street. It's still entertaining, but in terms of like being scary, this is terrifying to me.
I agree with you, and I think it's a really well done scene too.
Yeah. Oh yeah, it's really effective.
For me, I'm always like, I don't know if it would work, and it's a total crapshoot, but I'm like, I'm laying on the ground pretending to be dead.
like the chains won't see you if you're
well, I'm like, maybe he won't sense that I'm alive. I mean, he's a hell demon, so maybe he will, but I at least have a shot. Like these people that are just banging at the door like fucking the kids in the gym at Carrie, like no, you that's not gonna help you.
Yeah, you're calling
but that just
attention
rings
to
of like
yourself.
pure panic, which is exactly what I would be doing.
I did need a high heel shoe in someone's face. That's what I needed from this scene. But otherwise, perfect.
I will say the CGI of the ice cube transforming into Doug Bradley's face and then skewering that woman.
Not good, right? Don't tell me you thought that was good.
I thought it was interesting. I mean, it's primitive
silly.
CGI. Trace, this is literally the first time CGI is being used in a horror film. Come on, man.
I totally agree, and I get interesting. Yes, good. No, I actually think that the CGI with what's her face's skinning earlier in the film, that actually looks really
I think
good,
that looks good, yeah.
because it's so fast. But it's not calling attention to itself. Whereas this ice cube thing, also the prop itself doesn't look good. Like once it cuts to it actually impaling her face, it just looks like a big hunk of plastic.
For me, the most effective part of the whole scene is actually the very end where the door
The blood.
closes and you see the door
I
coming
love
from
it.
under while just hearing the chains like kind of sweep up the last of the mess.
Yeah, it's like the sound just gets quieter as
Mhm.
the bodies.
It's also a lengthy hold. Like, we hold on the blood and the sounds for, I want to say, like 10 seconds.
Mm-hmm.
I like it. I
Yeah,
like it
I
a
love
lot.
it. Mhm.
I mean, this is the scene
the
that
best
people
part.
remember from this film.
And it's good.
Yeah, this and, CD, the DJ Cenobite.
Well, let's go into this. Yeah, let's go into this whole last, 30 minutes of the movie.
Yeah, so basically, Joey ends up getting lured to the Boiler Club, and she ends up calling Dexter's dad. She arrives. There are hundreds of bodies here.
Yeah.
Just so many.
This is also the last bit of unrated footage that I could tell. Again, it's possible I missed some, but yeah, there's more shots of more bodies as she walks around the club. Like, it's a longer scene of her walking around seeing bodies.
I mean, I don't think you need that because it's already overwhelming. Like, she goes into a whole new room that's been set up like a sexy candle thing, and there's just so many more bodies waiting for her there. Okay, you two tell me if you recognize this. Did you know that JP is the body on the motorcycle?
No, I had no
No.
idea.
Because that's why he gets the pistons.
Okay.
Well, because he got the pistons in his head earlier when he was confronting the pillar, so I didn't know what that was. So
Yeah, I
that
didn't
makes more
recognize that.
sense.
It's apparently because he's into motorcycles, to which I'm
Okay.
like, well, film, you didn't do a great job of that, because when he shows up with pistons later, I'm just like, well, this is an odd choice.
I just thought it was because like he was just like a walking erection. They were basically just like, this is what he does. He thrusts. Like, this is his thing.
I mean, that also works, Brian. Yeah, so she and Pinhead exchange words. He's amused by her. He goes to kill her, but of course she's got the box, so he can't, so she makes a run for it. Now we get the street action. So we have electrified water, exploding stores, flying manhole covers, and a chain that attacks her boobs.
And like 3 New Yorkers.
Yeah, it is the middle of the night, I guess.
I love the electrified water. I'm a sucker for that. And also the shots of like the camera like on her heels as she's running away from this. I'm a real sucker for that. But yeah, the boob chain and those 3 New Yorkers. Oh, the sewer lid frisbee.
Yeah. It feels like they're trying to go really big and give you like, oh my god, the world is ending. Like, we are losing all control to these otherworldly powers. But it just kind of feels like a bit of a video game. Like, make
Yeah.
it down the street without getting decapitated.
I do need to confess something though,
Yes.
because it's such a stupid reveal, and it kind of is like the pivot to like the downfall of the Cenobites in terms of like where they go.
And any scariness, yeah.
The scene where she's in front of the TV store and she sees herself pop up on the screens
Yes.
is creepy as hell.
I do like it. And it echoes back to the way that she's introduced by Doc in
True.
the opening, right?
It actually subverted my expectations though, because I thought what was going to happen was Pinhead was going to appear on the TV and like taunt her a little bit.
Yes,
okay.
yes.
So I like that we get kind of this peeping Tom gimmick where it's like, oh no, it's your cameraman look like walking towards you. I don't think it's quite as effective as it is intended to be, and like given how I'm saying it, like it sounds super creepy. It's not great, but I really like what they're trying to do with this scene.
Like
Yeah.
the setup is better than the punchline.
The execution. Yeah,
Yes.
yeah, exactly.
And I think that's how I feel about pretty much the rest of the film. I'm like, I get what you're trying to do. It's not quite working for me, and it's a little too histrionic, but props for giving it a try.
Yeah.
And I
No.
do feel like this is the last time, like, some of these Cenobites are dated the minute they get on screen. Like, if
Oh, yeah.
CD head, like, okay, that's early 90s now.
Mm-hmm.
But it is also, it seems like the last time they really put effort into the design for a large batch of Cenobites. I think they do to a certain extent in Bloodline, but only for 2 of them. You get like the twins,
Yeah,
and
like
you get
the
the
twins.
Angelique Cenobite, which I think was
Yeah.
But at least here, they're still trying. It's still kind of very bloody, and there's a lot of like intricate detail to the costumes that just gets left by the wayside in later entries.
And we're also getting Doc being really persnickety because he's like, ready for your close-up, Joey? And then also, that's a wrap.
No, I hated it. To me, this was 100% Freddy.
Yeah, the
I was like,
Freddiest
no,
of
we're
Freddy
having none of
one-liners.
this.
Which, why give it to Doc?
Yeah.
Like he wasn't seen as being like at all witty or anything like that
No.
before he was a Cenobite. So yeah, I'm not really sure.
I wish that they had have leaned into how creepy it would be for your father figure to be transformed into this monster who now wants to hurt you. Because instead, yeah, he's just glibly throwing out these one-liners, and it feels like he could be the same as any other Cenobite. Like, what distinguishes him now from someone like Barbie, the flame-throwing babyface Cenobite?
Yeah.
It was actually more effective. His first lines where he's like, have you seen what he did to me, you little bitch? Have you seen? Because they're playing with that. This is her father figure. And now he's like,
They have a relationship.
yeah. So playing with that by, turning something familiar and comforting to her into something that is now trying to kill her and blaming her for it is a lot better than just, okay, now he's just going to start spewing off some of these one-liners.
Yeah. And it becomes a problem, too, because it sets up what will also be a disappointing reveal when Cenobite Terry shows up.
Yes. I get it. Like I like the idea of like, each Cenobite, like the design is built on their I don't even want to say vice. I guess one aspect of their character, because with Doc we have the camera, with the DJ
It's
we have the
often their
CDs.
professions, if we're being honest. It's like you are your job when you become a Cenobite.
Yeah, but then with Terry, it's you're a smoker, so your like neck is open and you have a cigarette sticking out of it.
But she's also a dreamer, which is why she keeps talking about dreams.
Right.
Which is also what they named her on the Hellraiser wiki. Like, they actually name the Cenobite Dreamer.
Yeah.
Oh, okay.
Because she has that line earlier where she talks about how she doesn't dream and she feels
Right.
like she's missing out. And then Pinhead actually tries to lure her in by being like, you're on the dream world now.
No, and that makes her line, again, while we don't get enough of her, and we're not there yet, but when she goes, I have so many dreams now, or whatever she says to taunt Joey, like, that's actually a really creepy and very effective line.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, you just want more of it.
Yeah, it's falling so flat because they don't do anything with it.
Okay, so we're almost there. We just have to get through the church part first.
Okay.
So this was the most controversial scene in the film. Apparently, I guess during filming, not when it came out, but like during filming. Hickox had been refused permission to shoot inside a real church, so he used a matte painting as a background for the altar. When the crew complained of sacrilege, he told them it was no different than the countless Hammer horror films in which Christopher Lee as Dracula rampaged in churches.
I mean, he does melt a cross.
He also mimics the crucifixion.
Yeah.
I never went to church as a kid. I was not raised religious. But even I remember seeing this and going like, that seems a little blasphemous to me.
Mm-hmm. That moment where he stretches out his arms and tilts his head, it's so iconic.
It's iconic, it's great, but he's doing Jesus. Like, he's doing Jesus on the cross, and it's an amazing image. Again, even if you don't think this movie has a visual eye, which, as we've already established, we do think that shot is gorgeous and haunting and terrifying. It's so good.
Yeah. And, like, the altar cracks, like, the stone table and all that shit. And then, like, he literally gives this priest sacrament from his body.
This is the one kind of zingery line reading that I think actually works. When he gives the, this is my blood, this is my flesh. Lucky are those who come to my supper. And then just shoves a chunk of flesh into his mouth.
I love that. I love that. You'll burn in hell for this. Burn of such limited imagination.
Because whenever you can get Pinhead talking about torture, that's where your Hellraiser movie sits.
Yeah.
No, and again, like, as goofy as a lot of this, granted, I don't think that this scene is goofy. I do think that this scene is as effective as it needs to be. But as goofy as this third act is, like, it still works for me.
Mm-hmm. I think the other weird thing is that this feels like the pinnacle. Like, we should be setting our climax here in this church.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
And dealing with this now. And instead, we run to an abandoned construction zone.
So boring.
We briefly get JP and Terry, who just go around her a bunch of times. And then she solves the puzzle box and sends all the Cenobites away.
Yeah.
What?
Yeah. Yeah, there's several, like, climactic false starts. It could have been in the street where they're all kind of converging and all hell is breaking loose. It could have been in the church. nah, let's just have it be in this abandoned lot.
And I get it. Like, we've got to come back and pay off all of this dream imagery and do one last temptation and see whether or not Joey is up to snuff. I don't know. This isn't a long movie, but this is the part where I'm just like, all right.
Well, because it feels like it's over, and then
Yes.
it goes again, and yeah.
Yeah.
It's trying to present itself as if it is over, but like, it's not.
Yeah.
Right.
Like, this is all going to come to a reveal that, like, he's screwing with her. And so you're just kind of like counting the seconds down until the reveal happens.
Yeah, I just don't understand how you quote unquote solve the puzzle box. I really don't understand it.
Yeah, it always seems to have different meanings, right? Like, sometimes you just have to rub it and blue energy will come out and zap the Cenobites. And then sometimes you have to do it a different way and then a knife thing comes out of it.
Yeah, and granted, the knife thing works, I think, here and in the second one.
Yes.
But, okay, so we've already kind of talked about the dad tricking her, like, done better in Elm Street 3. I do like her getting strung up as the two Pinheads as Elliot and Pinhead are talking.
Mm-hmm.
Her getting strung up was the Clive Barker element, right? That was kind of some of the stuff that he added in.
Oh, yeah. That's why we got some S&M bondage in here, baby.
Well, because again, like, what would she have been doing if she wasn't there? She was just going to be standing there, like, watching them?
When the kind of the phallic thing comes out of the ground, which I'm guessing is supposed to be an allusion back to Chenard's, like, penis hat.
It certainly
is,
seems like it.
and that's also Barker's addition.
The one thing I noticed, this thing always used to creep me out because that mesh of, like, the organic and the machinery is really creepy to me. But this time, I couldn't help but notice that it had, like, leather paraphernalia on. Like, it had a little leather collar and had, like, chains coming out of it. I'm like, oh, it's a little leather
so
daddy.
cute.
That's so cute.
It's like baby fetish wear.
Yes. Like my first leather.
I mean, we all have to do it at some point.
Yeah, everybody's got to break into kink at some point. And what better way to start than with fleshy penis appendage thing?
I'll tell you, when I finally buy my first harness, I'm going to get a Hellraiser themed harness.
Well, your birthday is coming up, Trace.
Yeah, both of our birthdays are coming up.
Well, I mean, while we're at it, mine's not too far away either. So
Wait, when is your birthday, Brian?
February 23rd.
Oh my god,
February
you're between
babies.
us! I'm 27th and Joe's the 9th.
Awesome. February babies.
So my issue with this part, feel free to call me a purist, but there's a part here where Pinhead advances on her, actually several times, with this knife.
Yeah, that's not his style.
Yeah, this is not his style. He does not dispatch people personally and never by hand.
Well, the thing is, so again, the movie's trying to build suspense because she's finally out, she's got the puzzle box, and the suspense factor is he is walking towards her and she needs to solve the puzzle box, again, solve in quotes, before he reaches her. And I'm like, we just saw this fucker massacre a club with hooks coming out of everywhere.
He is moving at a glacial pace and apparently no longer has chains. I guess part of it could be that, they're in limbo. He doesn't have his powers.
It's also because him and Elliot merge, so it's like Elliot's humanity holding him back.
Yeah. I mean, I do like that duality, and I think it's interesting that we actually get that other example of early CGI when they merge. We get to see it paid off in 4 when the twins do the exact same thing.
And I will say he's also, like, he first advancing on her with that weird curly backwards knife before they merge, because it's while he's got it raised that, like, things shift and you realize you're back in limbo.
Yes.
And I guess, like, one of the things, like, if you wanted to, it's a bit of a stretch, but on the Hellraiser wiki, which, Joe, I'm so glad you introduced me to, because it is a treasure trove of insanity.
Yes. Folks, if you have never tracked down horror movie wikis, they're fantastic for Friday the 13th, and apparently also great for Hellraiser.
Yeah, because kill by kill.
Yes.
They've repeatedly gone back to the Friday the 13th wiki treasure trove, but it's very nice to know that Hellraiser also has its own devoted, we'll say, fans, and there are theories woven into a lot of this as fact. And so one of the things that they bring up in the synopsis for Hellraiser 3 is that the reason that Pinhead is now trying to take over the world is because he doesn't have that human side of Elliot Spencer kind of keeping him in his lane. So now he's not like this, esoteric S&M, priest. He's just evil and he's trying to take over the world. So you could see that as like, well, he's willing to like, stab people with his with whatever he's got on him now until he goes back to like full Pinhead with Elliot Spencer mode.
Right.
But again, that's based off of the theories of people who
or making shit up as they go along.
The timing of the release, I mean, because this is 1992, like, this is before Scream. Horror is all but dead at this point in terms of, like, franchises. It's interesting that they kind of take this pseudo-slasher route for this climax when the slasher genre is, like, on its last
gasp.
Yeah.
I don't know. I think they thought they were giving the fans what they wanted because it's so much more Pinhead and a Pinhead backstory and like a hot final girl who's American.
The ironic thing is, like, if you're trying to give people what they want and give them so much more Pinhead, he doesn't show up until halfway through the movie and he's in a pillar for the first 20 minutes.
Well, wait, no. He's not in the first 30 minutes. He's in a pillar from 30 to 50 minutes.
And that's what I mean, yeah. From when he starts on screen, he's in a pillar. So, like, you don't get full Pinhead until, like 50 minutes into the movie.
50 minutes, yeah, exactly.
It is madness, yeah.
I mean, again, it doesn't bother me. Like, I'm fine with the pacing of this movie for the most part, minus a bit of maybe dragginess in that first act. But overall, like, I think the movie's paced pretty well.
See, I disagree. And I think it's maybe just because I'm too attached to the characters. But, like, when JP and Terry disappear, for me, I'm like, cool, we've got a lot of bombastic action sequences, but I'm very much less involved. And by the time we're getting to all of the Cenobite shit in the construction zone, I'm like, no, I'm good.
I don't disagree with you. And, again, it's a weaker film because of that. Mm-hmm. But I'm still never bored in this movie. I mean, I get to where, like, I maybe pulled out of it a little bit because, yes, like, the church scene is, like, the movie at its peak, and then it's kind of like, after that. Mm-hmm. But it's still fine. Yeah. It's fine for me.
Still enjoyable. So we have basically come to the end. We have dispatched Pinhead. Elliot is, presumably in hell with him, so...
Go to hell is her closer.
Yeah. And, she is deposited back in the real world at the construction site, and dawn is breaking. It's going to be a beautiful day. She's like, hey, there's some wet concrete. I'm just going to press this box into it.
Okay, it's dawn, right? So no one's been on this site to work.
All night.
All night. Why is there a pool of wet cement?
Yeah, it just stays fresh.
It wasn't quick dry cement, so there you go.
It's like Acme wet concrete, lasts for long hours.
In case you get stuck. In case you fall in.
Yeah. So she presses this box in, and we get a nice little dissolve to people entering this office tower, where the lobby is decorated with giant pieces of artwork from the Lament configuration. And if you don't know what that means, then you are now caught up to Bloodline, and you can go back and listen to last year's episode.
Yeah, for fake Numi Rapace. I will say, it does actually work. If we're going to consider this a trilogy, like the Scarlet Box wants to consider it, it does work as a series ender, but because Bloodline gives you that definitive ending, and it's like the saga, it's a prequel and a sequel and a sidequel.
A spacequel.
Whatever it is. Yeah, it's just like... I really wish that they just included that fucking movie.
I know, and give us the fucking extended whatever cut.
Yeah, I don't care if it's shitty work print footage. Like, I'll watch the stupid, with the numbers on top and bottom of the screen, the dailies.
Yes.
If they're literally going to reshoot a whole nother movie to give us the Snyder Cut
Justice
League, then why can't you take footage you actually already have and give us the Yeager cut?
I mean, Adam Scott's right there. He's still working. He'll probably come back and do it.
Exactly. He loves this franchise.
Adam Scott, can you please come back and finish Hellraiser 4 for us?
You have to play the Numi Rapace parts too, though.
Yes.
So, gents, I have a very quick game I would like to play with you. So the pseudo-Cenobites are all defined by some kind of vice or work-related thing that defines who they become as hell demons. And I would love to know, what kind of Cenobite would you become?
Oh, God.
I feel like if it's the piece of equipment that is always on me, it's probably a cell phone, but that would be for everybody. We could go fun and make it a podcasting mic.
I'm just imagining your head being replaced by a podcast mic.
With a pop filter in front of one of my eyes as an eye patch.
Ooh, I like it.
Or I did recently come into possession of a fleshlight, and so maybe it could be fun to have a fleshlight Cenobite.
I feel like that's redundant.
That's true. Point taken.
And Mr. Bryan?
See, this sucks because I'd love to be able to come up with something that's like
Clever.
dark and clever and sexy, but like if we're talking about the things that bring me the most joy, I'd be like the fucking cheese Cenobite or something like that. It would just be very, I don't even know what that would look like, but like
Are we talking like a block of cheddar cheese, or are we talking like a cheese and charcuterie board cheese?
charcuterie, because I guess that's at least on the way to being somewhat sexy. Like I'm not like Cheese Whiz, like that would be ridiculous. Yeah,
Right.
It's like, a very elaborate charcuterie board, and maybe like some kind of like, the cheese wire from like the slicer, that's what's doing a lot of the damage, or like it's
yes.
sliced into me or whatever. But yeah, it would be wholly unsexy, whatever it is.
Just throwing little pieces of apricot at people. Yeah, I tried to think this up. This game was actually quite a bit harder than I thought it was going to be. I was like, I could do something with young adult literature. That sucks. I could do something with adult education. That sucks. So, yeah, let's go with something podcasty.
Wait, you have a kink though. Like, is it a foot kink?
What? Ew, no. No
No?
shame to the foot kink people. That is not my deal.
Nothing. Oh, okay, I was like nothing about. But don't you have something? You have something.
God, fine. It's gonna be a sailor Cenobite?
There you go. Yeah.
That's terrible.
Yes.
That would be doable, like anchors and like
Ooh, I'll throw an anchor. Okay.
Oh
I
no,
like this a lot more.
like ship work, ship stuff. Yeah.
Yeah. Okay, cool. I ended up with the best one, so thank you for workshopping that with me.
But you have to have the hat too. The hat.
Oh, obviously. The hat is what makes it sexy.
The wheel will be like on your neck, but like as a necklace, so you can like spin it around and kill people with it.
Ooh, fun.
there'll be a nod to Popeye where like you'll have these giant deformed forearms.
Big arms.
Yes. Love it.
Now I've got a Halloween costume. Take that, sexy gaze.
All right. That will close out Hellraiser 3 for us, I think. Final thoughts on the film, y'all?
Mr. Bryan?
I love it for all of its stupidity. It's in the same vein as It Chapter 2, where it is a horrible adaptation or continuation of the source material, but it is still a very entertaining movie that I like quite a bit.
Okay, stay tuned in 2 weeks for us, because we have another movie that will fall in that for those parameters as well.
Wow, Trace.
I know. I'm getting there early, but yes. Actually, for next week, too.
Wow, Trace.
I think this movie is really fun. I actually liked it more on this rewatch. This is the second time I've seen it. I saw it for the first time in a marathon of this franchise, and coming off of 2, I was like, oh, it's all right. And then, like, you know, in hindsight, after watching 4 through whatever the fuck 10, I was like, oh, 3 is way better than all those. Watching it by itself on its own terms, and after doing all that research, I enjoyed this quite a bit. It's not like it's not like a 4-star film, but I think it's like a 3.5 for me.
Yeah, and for me, this is reflective of a certain kind of sequel that Hollywood was comfortable churning out. I do think it's dumb fun, but I think it's agreeable in that sense. Like, it's kind of trying to be something, and it's mostly getting there, and I respect its ambitiousness. Do I wish it had a bit more polish? Do I wish that they were giving the characters their due? Sure. But at the end of the day, yeah, absolutely give me this over any of those later entries, because at least this one's enjoyable to watch.
Great. All right. Well, before we announce what we're covering next week, Bryan, where can people find you on social media and what's going on?
Pretty much at this point, I only do Twitter, just because that takes up way too much of my time anyway, so I can't imagine juggling multiple social media handles. But you can find me at Evil Taylor Hicks. And yeah, just if you want to see any of the stuff I'm writing, like they said, Daily Dead, where I do Let's Scare Bryan to Death, and I think in the near future I'll be bringing back my other column soon, Catalog from the Beyond, where I talk about kind of like the B-side cuts of famous horror icons. And yeah, you can see me at Rue Morgue, where I cover short horror, Cinepunks, where I'm doing a little bit of just odds and ends stuff, and yeah, just any episodes of Corpse Club that you want to listen to. From time to time I pop up on there pretty regularly too.
Nice.
Love it. Well, if you want to get in touch with us, you can reach us on Twitter and Instagram at Horror Queers. You can also join our Facebook Horror Queers group to hang out with other listeners. We also have a letterbox now for the podcast, so please go find us there. We keep basically everything we cover up to date on our diary, and we have lists of everything. It's great. If you have a moment, please rate and review us on Apple Podcasts. We love that, and it helps us in search results. If you want even more content, please support the show by becoming a patron at patreon.com/horrorqueers. This month, we're in the middle of January, so we'll have, we've already posted our results of the 2020 Hereditaries, our horror version of the Oscars, and our audio commentary on Final Destination 3 to go with our month of threes. Upcoming, we will have an episode on CBS All Access's The Stand, Apple TV's Servant, and the controversial new film, Promising Young Woman. So go to patreon.com/horrorqueers for that.
Yep, that one's a big one.
It's a big one. Joe, we are continuing our month of threes. What are we talking about next week?
Oh gosh, I feel like I've been waiting 2 years for this, Trace. So ever since you and Michael Verratti talked up a big game on our Psycho 2 episode way back in the day, I've been wondering what the deal is with Psycho 3.
Here's the thing. It is not better than Psycho 2. It is very much in the vein of Hellraiser 3, where it's like, it's dumb fun.
Right.
It's campy. It's way campier than 2 as well.
I can vouch for that.
So walk into it with that mindset. It's easily the weakest of the first 3, but it's still kind of this bizarre, like, I can't believe this got made. Also, Perkins directed it.
Yes, I'm excited. I'm going to drink all the alcoholic beverages and revel in the camp.
Love it. Well, again, Bryan, thank you so much for joining us. It's been a treat.
Thanks for having me.
And on that note, we can cross out Hellraiser 3 Hell on Earth.
Yes, and cross out Horror Queers.
You've made it to the end of another bloody, disgusting podcast. Congratulations. If you like our programming, consider searching for other bloody, disgusting podcasts, such as Creepy, Horror Queers, The Boo Crew, SCP Archives, Nightlight, Margaret's Garden, Nightmare on Film Street, and more.
Hello, I'm Shelby Scott, the host of Scare You to Sleep, a podcast where I tell you spooky bedtime stories full of creepy sound effects and music that is soothing yet unsettling to help immerse you into a world of horror. This is a show for those of us who have realized horror can be a strange but relaxing escape from reality. Speaking of escapes, sometimes I lead you through guided nightmares, like a guided meditation, but instead of flowery meadows, I take you on a journey through your own personal nightmare. So come get lost in the terror with me. Listen to Scare You to Sleep wherever you listen to podcasts, or find us online at bloody.fm. Sweet screams.